everybody. I'm Ginger Zumaeta, CEO of Motive3, and I am here with an old friend and colleague, Mark Mears, the author of The Purposeful Growth Revolution and also owner and founder of Leap Growth Ventures. And we were just figuring out that it's been about 14-ish years since we've actually broken bread together. And I'm super excited to catch up with you, Mark. If you want to give a little bit of background about you, and then we'll just jump into a conversation.
Yeah, Ginger, thank you so much for having me as a guest on your show. And I'm not sure I like the way you introduced me with an emphasis on the word old friend. Although my salt and pepper beard has become a little more salty than peppery. But that just means we're both wiser, as a sign of wisdom. I'm really excited to be on here with you and your listeners and followers on LinkedIn. You talk about my favorite topic, purposeful growth. And, it's been quite a journey for me from a career perspective. And our paths did cross when we both worked for NBC Universal. You worked for the TV affiliate, and I worked for the theme park in Southern California. But we both worked together in synergy with all of the NBC Universal media outlets, which is a really cool way of demonstrating integrated marketing communications within our own company. And that was really special.
Yeah, it was super cool. Well, you and I were catching up before we hit the record button on so many things. I'm gonna kick off the conversation first, Mark. What is purposeful growth? I know you've got a framework. I'm a framework junkie, by the way. So I'd love to just hear more about what purposeful growth is and kind of, what frameworks you have underpinning it.
Yeah, well, it's really the foundation for my purposeful growth revolution. And that word revolution is very important as well. And we'll get to that. But the way I define purposeful growth is this notion of, I think we all want to grow. And so when I ask the question kind of rhetorically, who wants to grow? Everybody says, oh, I do. I want to grow personally. I want to grow professionally. I want to grow relationally and even spiritually. But how do I want to grow? I want to grow on purpose. And it all comes back to a fig tree that we had in our backyard when I was living in California, out in Valencia. And it was an epiphany that hit me February 21st, 2013. And at that time, I'd left Universal, I'd left the Cheesecake Factory, and I was now president of a $500 million casual dining chain down in Orange County. And I left because I was told, we're the company that owned us, we got plenty of capital. We just need someone to help turn this brand around, and we'll put more capital behind it than you can stand. And I'm a competitive son of a gun, as you know. And I said, okay, I'm going to be the guy that's going to lead this effort. So I built the team. Sure enough, within 2 years, we turned it around from double-digit negative sales to positive growth. We put a new brand positioning in play, changed the menus, updated the culture, updated everything, and then even created a new business model. And all the while we were thinking, we're going to make this the best and biggest turnaround in any of our careers. And I led with something called the rule of threes. And that, for those of you who know, 3 things, if you focus on 3 things, you're more than likely going to be more successful. And my 3 things became my mantra: leadership, engagement, and accountability. If we lead up and down the ranks, we get a big turnaround ahead of us, but we're going to need leadership up and down the ranks. We're going to need engagement with people's heart, head, hands, and habits for us to do this monumental task. And we're going to need accountability to ourselves, the commitments that we make to our teams, accountability to our customers or guests, and to our team members and our business partners, because after all, we were a division of a publicly traded company. So leadership, engagement, accountability, that became my mantra throughout. Every week we would do emails. And back then, if you remember, we had voicemails that were able to be broadcast. And I had it tied into our reward and recognition program. Everybody knew that's what I stood for, and I would use it as an opportunity to highlight people like, hey, Ginger's really demonstrating wonderful leadership. And here's how she's engaging her team, or here's how she's holding people accountable, and look at the results she's getting. All the while, the corporate entity that owned us decided, oh my gosh, they've turned this around pretty quick. Why don't we seek strategic alternatives? So I was told that that's what they were going to do. We've decided to move in a different direction. That was the first I'd heard of that, and the second was about to follow. So we go through this whole process, and I'm leading the sale process. I can't tell anybody on my team at the time, because if we don't find the appropriate buyer or don't get the appropriate amount of money for the brand, then we weren't going to sell it. And I would just stay as if everything was going normal. You can imagine how stressful that was. But I digress. Then we found a strategic play, not a private equity firm. And we were all thinking, you know what? We found our rightful owner. Our parent has come home. And they said all the right things, and the deal closed on a Friday. We're drinking champagne over the weekend. And Monday morning at 8 o'clock, I'm supposed to meet the new CEO to plot our future together. At 8:05, I'm out the door. We've decided to move in a different direction. And I said, what, over the weekend? So I drive from, Orange County out to Valencia, where I lived. And like I said, this is about February 21st, 2013, just about 10 years ago. And I took the dog outside after a fitful night of sleep, and there on that fig tree that was in our backyard that was barren from the 6 or 7 weeks of winter we do get in Southern California, there on the end of one branch was a tiny little sprig of a leaf just starting to bud. And I got this epiphany in that moment that a leaf is a symbol of growth and rebirth. I took the dog inside. I kind of went into my office, started banging out a treatment on my computer that not only is LEAP a symbol of growth and rebirth, it's an acronym, which stands for leadership, engagement, accountability, my 3 rules. And yet one thing that was missing was F for fulfillment. We were burning the candle at both ends. We were chasing numbers to chase numbers. We were trying to do this heroic Houdini-like turnaround, and we were burning ourselves out. Yeah. And then to get sold, and then not only myself, but my whole management team got shown the door. They then moved the office from Southern California, which they said they weren't going to do, to their Dallas, US headquarters. And I got to thinking, this is BS. I should have had a more fulfilling experience, and my team should have had a more fulfilling experience. So that became a mental model for circle Venn diagram, all integrated around purposeful growth. And so that fig tree only knows how to be a fig tree, right? That's its purpose. Its purpose is to grow fig leaves that create through photosynthesis growth that bears fig fruit. And what's cool, Ginger, is that fig fruit has seeds in it, which can be scattered for future growth. And so that became my model for the book, and Leaf Growth Ventures, which is a consultancy that is designed to inspire individuals, teams, and organizations to find purpose in fulfilling their true growth potential.
I love it. I mean, there's everything you said about the 4 aspects of it, and I think purpose in general, like what I'm taking away from this, Mark, is the real focus on intention. We've both been in the corporate grind before, and you love that company until it decides to stop loving you. You're like, what's happening? And so I'm interested in, I work mostly with companies who are trying to grow, right? Yeah. And a lot of times the way that they're trying to grow is, I'm a big believer in that reality is created in language. Yes. You think thoughts, we think in words. You start to put those words, around an idea, and the way you communicate to your people, to yourself, to others, right, etc., ends up really driving kind of what you become as a company, and to the extent that you're the leader of that company, what you become as a leader. And so I just see so many crossovers there. One of the things that I'm super interested in, and I had a conversation with someone a couple weeks back, is this idea of the people make up the company. Mm-hmm. the brand doesn't have a brand apart from the people. I'm a big believer. The reason we're evangelic about messaging playbooks for companies is because a lot of times the people in the field, the people in the ground aren't really given the tools or the understanding of what's this all about? Where do I fit into this? What is my role in this? And so I'd love to just kind of tease that out with you a little bit in terms of like, how does your thinking treat that?
Yeah, well, I love that. And as a brand strategist and communication expert, you got to be aligned, right? You got to have all oars in the water rowing together, right? So if you've got a situation where there are people that are not aligned with the messaging and are not living it out, well, what do you think the customer experience is going to be?
Yeah.
It's not going to be aligned with what you're advertising. And so that's when I got to thinking about, again, this 4-circle Venn diagram. And while it's not the be all end all for everything, it comes in handy quite a bit as I explain certain things. And I think that there are 4 brands. As you're counseling your clients, most of them are thinking maybe about 2, the internal brand and the external brand. Those have to be aligned. And that's how many of us were taught. But there's actually 2 more. The first one is the personal brand. And we all have one, and it's starting to become in vogue where it's like, I got to build my personal brand. Okay, well, we all have it, but it's essentially, how do you show up, right? And I think about each of these 4 brands as answering a question. Your personal brand answers a question, who am I? I mean, you got to be authentic to yourself. And we've all worked in places where we didn't feel like we could truly be ourselves because we thought we had to wear a mask or fit in a mold. Or else we'd rock the boat and not be seen as a fit with the culture. We're going to talk about that word culture in a minute. So you've got to be able to be comfortable in your own skin. And then the second brand is the internal brand. That's all the internal stakeholders that has to answer the collective we question. What do we stand for? And these are our purposeful vision, mission, and values. Your vision is something that's aspirational out in the future, and your mission is what are you going to do every day to get there? But your shared values are, how are we going to do this together? And the third brand is the external brand, which most people think is the only brand, because we're all inundated with advertising and promotion and whatnot. And so we're like, what are brands saying to us? And do we trust them? And how do we feel about that? And that's another word we're going to get into in a minute. Well, the external brand are guests or customers or clients, depending on your type of business, B2C, B2B. And then it answers the question, what value is exchanged here? I mean, at the end of the day, all business is about a value exchange. What do I get for what do I pay? But also it's about how do I feel afterwards? We're really in the feelings business, not just the people business. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then finally, there's the employer brand. I mean, we've seen historic lows in unemployment rates. We've seen the great resignation or quiet quitting, and how people are basically, given more options today than they ever had. And so the power has kind of gone back to the people instead of the institution. And so the question that's answered there is, do I belong? Right? And so how do I attract people? If someone's going to say, do I want to work at X, Y, or Z company? I'm going to ask the question to myself, well, do I feel like I belong there? Not just fit in, but belong. Because in this world of diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, diversity just gets us in the door. Equity gives us an equal voice, and that's good. Inclusion gets us a seat at the table, that's even better. But if we don't feel like we belong, Ginger, we're more than likely not going to feel vulnerable enough to give our very best. We're going to just be happy to be in the room where it happens, to quote Hamilton, right? And so we don't want to rock the boat. It took us a long time to get in this room, to get this seat, to have a chance at an equal voice, but we don't want to say something that may incriminate us or sound stupid. And so we don't do any of that. And who wins in that scenario, right? So like that 4-circle Venn diagram with your personal brand, the internal brand, the collection of we, then the external brand, who we serve, and then the employer brand, who do we want to attract and retain? All of those, like 4 wheels on your car, have to be aligned. Because if they're not aligned, you'll go off the road, or you'll run up some of your tire treads, et cetera. And so I think that's really the critical thing that people need to understand is how to align all four of those brands beyond or is part of a broader ecosystem that is laser focused on their purpose and their vision and their mission and their values. And if that happens, everything else, all four stakeholders are going to win: team members, customers, business partners, and communities.
Wow. I mean, I'm just kind of crazy about that because Mark, I feel like you and I are sort of, singing from the same songbook in many ways,
Yeah.
because and first of all, I love the insight, and we've both seen it over and over again with multiple companies, that there is this sense, or has been historically, this sense of two brands, right? The internal brand and the external brand. And
Right.
very often we've been brought in to try to, they maybe started growing apart, and we're brought in to kind of try to fuse them back together. But, and especially today, there is that personal brand. I mean, we're in an age of personal brands as it is. And we're also moving a lot more towards, it used to be that you could have a corporate communications department and then also your marketing department, and they were putting things out, and you didn't necessarily hear from the rank and file or the CEO. I have a personal belief now that like everything is moving into the feeds, off of the blogs and off of the About Us page and into the feeds, because nobody reads websites anymore, unless they're very, very down funnel and they're kind of tire kicking. So personal brand actually matters a lot. I think of it maybe with a slight twist on yours, but I want to come back to that. And then I agree with the employer brand. I mean, one of the reasons that we, it took us a while to kind of, I'll tell you how the messaging playbook came about is kind of crazy, because we would come up with these brand unifications. It's like, here's the stuff: mission, vision, values, position, brand promise, messaging pillars. Like it should all be in there. Those are the seeds in a way.
Yeah, I
right?
like that. Yeah.
But a seed without soil and a seed without water and a seed with, doesn't get very far. And so that's where we got with the messaging playbook, is like, we need to actually find a way to help companies implement these ideas so that they could activate these ideas at scale and all be on the same path. And that helps people realize, is this where I want to be? Do I have a place here? Is my personal ethos in keeping with the ethos of this place that I'm working?
Yeah, no, you're dead on. And that's why I call it an ecosystem, because you have to have the soil, the sun, the rain that allows that photosynthesis, that nurturing environment for growth to occur. And so that's why I don't like the word culture. I prefer the word community.
Yeah.
Because a culture may just be a place you feel merely a part of. Not bad, but a community is a place you feel like you belong in. And that's why I say we're in not just the people business. I don't care what industry sector you may represent, until the robots or the zombies or Chat GPT comes and takes us away. We're all people. We're all human beings. And at our core, we have feelings. And so we, for years, were not allowed to express feelings at work. It was, don't bring that weak crap in here, leave that at home, keep your nose to the grindstone. It's all about results. Nobody wants to hear about your personal situation. And yet we're whole people. Right. And today, I think COVID gave us all a bit of a timeout to reflect deeply on not only what, but who matters most in our lives. And when we think about that, whether we got COVID ourselves, whether a family member was hospitalized, or God forbid, someone we knew or loved died as a result of it, it was real. And we were sheltered in place. We didn't really know what was going on. We were dealing with, people's lives and businesses on Zoom. And I think people said, it's time to change that old command and control leadership style, not because Mark Mears says so, but the Sloan School of Management, I'll get back to that word in a minute, at MIT, said in a survey of 34 million people who left the workforce during COVID, they asked them one key question: why? And number one answer, 10x over the second most given answer, was toxic work environment. compensation didn't come up till number 16 on the list. It's as if people like the old broadcast news line, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. I don't want to go back to old way of work. And I guarantee you, millennials and Gen Z, I've got 26-year-old daughters who fall in there, and I guarantee you their expectation of work is so much different than it was in my day, in your day. And so leaders need to learn how to grow from being a manager. Most of us who went to business school were taught how to manage. You manage teams, you manage resources, you manage budgets, you manage projects, timelines, results, metrics, etc. And so we didn't develop leadership qualities, and so it was very transactional. Well, now moving toward more of a leadership model is more relational. And finally, though, the trick is to grow into a living legacy builder. And that means a leader is someone you want to follow, but a legacy builder is a leader. Not only do you want to follow them, you want to emulate them. A great example for me was a guy named David Novak, who was the head of marketing at Pizza Hut years ago, and I worked for him. And I thought he was the most incredible leader I'd ever worked with. I would want to run through brick walls for that guy. Well, he later became co-founder of Yum Brands and led it to tremendous heights. And he wrote a book called Taking People With You. And I remember reading that going, man, that's how he led. He took people with him. And so that's what I mean by going to that next step. And how you go from culture to community is by leading differently through this legacy building model I call love. I want to put the human back in human resources, and I say all we need is love. Not the kind of love that's going to get you a quick call from HR and escort out of the building, but it's a model that says listen, observe, value, and empower. And those are some of the most basic needs that Maslow identified years and years ago. We all need to feel seen and heard. We all need to feel valued, but more importantly, we need to feel empowered to be our very best. And you think about, I don't know about you, but when I learned to ride a bike, start with a trike, I think it was a couple of years before the big wheel became big. And then I got a bike, but I had training wheels. I wasn't ready to ride on my own. But then came that day when I don't remember if it was mom or dad or brother or sister, but one of them said, now it's your time to ride. And they took the training wheels off and they guided me down the sidewalk, and I fell down a few times. But then when I finally got the hang of it, I was able to pedal on my own, stop on my own, start on my own. The sense of freedom and empowerment I felt in that moment is, to this day, is palpable. I could remember it. And so what if we were to create an environment where we're listening to our team members, not employees, not workers, God forbid, not FTEs, but human beings like us, and we were to listen to them, not only what they're saying, but what they're not saying. Again, we're whole people. All of us have a personal life, or all of us have something going on, and we need to be comfortable and in a trusting environment where we can say, hey, this is what's going on with me. I'm going to need a little help this week. And then observe them in real time. I'm fortunate to live here in Kansas City with the World Kansas Championship Kansas City Chiefs. Andy Reid, Hall of Fame head coach, he doesn't wait for the end of the year to do some annual performance appraisal. Sounds like cattle or a piece of property or something. He's coaching and observing and encouraging and correcting every single day. So we need to be observed, and then we need to feel valued. Like our work matters here. We're part of a team that's doing something special. We understand our role. We feel valued in our role. We're recognized and rewarded for performance, but then we're also valued by being given opportunities to grow and learn, and then finally empowered to grow up into our full potential.
That is such a powerful acronym. I love it. Listen, observe, value, empower.
Yeah.
Love that.
It's easy.
I'm going to ask you a challenging question.
Yep.
Maybe a two-part question. The first one is, so the book, right? I mean, which is, I encourage everybody to get. I'm sure you can get it on Amazon and all the places. Who is it for?
You know, I get asked that a lot because different people that read it have told me, you know, I'm an executive and you've kind of helped me unlearn some things that I'd always kind of held true. Or I'm new and it's so cool to have this wisdom that you've put in this book at my young age, so I don't have to go through some of the things and I can get there. And then there's middle managers who go, I'm just not feeling fulfilled in work. I feel like I'm just punching a clock, getting paid every other week and living for the weekend. And so I know as a marketer, you're supposed to have a laser focus, but there really is a primary, secondary, and tertiary audience for it. And I'd say primary would be middle management who are looking for help to find purpose in what they're doing and maybe live a more fulfilled life. And so when I say I want to put the human back in human resources, there's people feeling like they're not being treated by humans. And again, not because I say so. Gallup, who does their annual global state of the workforce survey every year, shows that we are facing historic lows in terms of engagement. And reasons that they're saying so are not feeling connected to my purpose at work and not understanding the company's purpose, not being cared for at work, not getting a chance to do what I do best, not getting a chance to learn and grow, not having frequent conversations about my performance. All of those are very humanistic things. And so I want to help middle management leaders unlearn how to be part of an old command and control style of leadership that no longer serves us into more of an empathetic, humanistic leader. And it doesn't cost one more dollar. Labor's the number one line item on a P&L, and it doesn't cost one more dollar for people to feel safe being a human being to another human being. And changing the paradigm of climbing a ladder over someone else's back to get ahead instead of saying, you know what, I want to feel fulfilled in my life and work. I don't know about you, but as adults, we sleep about a third of our adult life. We work about a third, sometimes more, sometimes less. And we live a third of our life, sometimes more, sometimes less. Why can't we at least have all of our waking hours feel more purposeful in life and in work? And if you can meld those two together, now you're really cooking with gas. You're not going to quietly quit that. You're not going to want to resign from that. You're going to be more loyal. You're going to work harder. You're going to provide more of you're getting a more, hopefully a sense of ownership in the outcome. And that ultimately all four stakeholders win.
So, okay, here's the part two.
Mm-hmm.
We've both sat in like the top marketing role, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in the top, you've been a CEO at companies. I've been the CEO of my company for the last 13 years or so. And how does that leader, right? That brand builder, that person that has to stay within some swim lanes in terms of it. We both know that the only way you can even get to the point where you have a brand really is consistency. You got to have guardrails,
right?
And you've got to kind of concentrate your effort and your communications, what you say. And when I say, I don't mean just like out of your mouth. I mean, your product says what you stand for. Your service says what you stand for. Your people say what you stand for, the behaviors, et cetera. And that CMO or that CEO, they're responsible for guiding people to a point in the future,
right?
Not, an area in the future, but a destination. And so how do you reconcile that with purposeful growth in that individual? Does the individual self-select out? Like, I'm just kind of curious how you think about that.
Yeah, I think that, again, as human beings, we have so many dimensions to us, and not everybody's going to think alike. I will tell you, having served as CMO of the Cheesecake Factory, easily the best culture I've ever worked with that. So much work, hard work, over 300 menu items, almost all of them prepped fresh from scratch every single day, and an equally complex bar menu, right? The amount of work they have to do to study, to even get to be a team member is amazing. So it's not for everybody, I get it. But there's a reason why people stay there a long time, even though the work is tough. The culture is nurturing. It's an environment where they're given a ton of tools and training. I guarantee you they spent more on training than they did on marketing during my tenure, because they wanted the experience to be so unique and so special, and everybody was aligned. They had 19 daily commitments, and each day before the doors opened at 11, the team members would all get together. The managers would come in and then have someone each day selected to read one of those 19 commitments, and then say what it means to them. And also, what am I going to do today to fulfill it? And then the next day, when they got to the end of the 19, they started over again. It was consistency. It was staying on message. It was staying as part of, again, I'll say, a community instead of a culture. And I think that's really what it takes. Not every brand is committed to it. But the cool thing for me, as you know, having been both a president, CEO, and a CMO, is I didn't let the traditional boundaries of a CMO stop me from looking after the whole brand. Those 4 brands I just talked about. And so I would partner with HR. I would partner with operations. I would partner with finance and IT and every department, sales, whoever it was in the building, to make sure that we were all aligned. Because I knew whatever my marketing team or our agency partners would put forth in the marketplace, we had to execute, right? To build trust, to give people this feeling like they got the value they were looking for out of that exchange, whether it's restaurants, whether it's entertainment, whether it was retail, hospitality, the industries that I've been in. But it works in any business, because again, at the end of the day, we're all in the people business, and leaders need to understand that. And if they're not willing to listen to someone like you or me, they're going to find out the hard way, because labor is the number one line item of most people's P&L. And if they see people walk out the door and they have to replace them, you know how much cost goes into that? Do you know how much time loss of productivity goes into that process? How about the people that have to do 2 jobs until they backfill that position? What's the morale like then? So you think about this whole thing, and I feel confident that leaders are gonna, or managers are gonna have to learn how to be better leaders. And then if they're really good, they're gonna create what we used to call at Pizza Hut a leadership shadow, which essentially creates this ripple effect of other leaders who go out and do likewise. And that's how we'll change this paradigm. And we're not giving up one iota of productivity and profitability to do it. Matter of fact, we're going to gain. And I got case study after case study of companies who are more purposeful, and they're using that to attract and retain great people, get them to give their all, engage them on a deeper level, right? Satisfy their customer base, and give back in their communities. And to me, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's so great to hear, the Cheesecake Factory, when you said they spent more on training than they did on marketing, because it's funny. I mean, I've been a kind of pure marketer for a long time, and a lot of times we started playing around with this different idea of kind of what really is a brand operating system, because the reality is, there's how you express your brand, which is usually the realm of marketing, sales and marketing, right? We're trying to express.
Right.
Then there's how you create value in the brand, which is all of the stuff that's kind of happening behind the scenes. And I think that the challenge that we see all the time is sometimes we're like, sure, we can build you a great message, or we can suggest a great campaign, or even, build you, a whole narrative platform. But if no one's gonna let everybody behind the kitchen door know this is what we're talking about, and help them and bring them along to see if it fits, and if your product isn't gonna pay off on the promise that you're making, and your service folks aren't gonna answer the phone, like, you're just all talk, no action. And so I definitely, I'm seeing more and more, kind of as you're saying, it's like, if you're going to spend your money wisely, right, you got to do the internal work.
Yeah.
Get that buy-in, do story mining. One of the things that we've done with some companies is, we'll come up with a kind of work in progress narrative platform, but you have to stress test it. Because let me tell you, we've come up with some where it's like you talk to the teams and they're like, I don't think so. That's not
Yeah.
actually who this company is. But
Yeah.
other times you're like, okay, well, let's do some story mining here. You know, how does this express in your role? And then it's kind of amazing because you'll see people at every level of the organization say, oh yeah, well, you know, just yesterday I was talking to a customer that blah blah blah, or you know, the other day I was talking to my fellow team member about this, and you know, this happened that's in keeping with this narrative, and then it sort of becomes theirs. I agree, you've
Yeah.
got to do the work inside the company. Brands are built from the inside out, right? And I think in the old days it used to be like, you know, we could, in the Mad Men days, you came up with a message, you know, and you threw it out
Slogan.
there. Yeah. And nobody had a chance to give you a rating or hit up your Twitter or your X or
Right.
whatever and tell you how terrible you were doing, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's just it, it's a different time. And I think that smart companies, smart leaders, right, understand I need to get the foundation of my house, you
Yeah.
know, set before I start, you know, throwing up, you know, all of the timber and all of the other stuff. I can only take that metaphor so far,
And
but
start decorating the windows and so forth. I love what you said, a few seconds ago about that foundation. And you mentioned even social media, right? Okay. Well, I grew up learning a very simple model for marketing communications: think, feel, do. And those at the time were integrated, right? What do you think about a product or service, um, you know, rationally? Okay, is this going to solve my problem? And then how do you feel about it emotionally? You know, how am I going to feel when I get into this car? You know, rationally, I could pick 15 other cars that will get me from point A to point B, and maybe even for less money. But how am I going to feel? And I spend a lot of time in my car, and I just want to feel something because that's part of the value equation. And then is like act. What's the action I'm going to take? I'm going to try something new for the first time. Am I going to eat, or buy more of it? Am I going to buy it more often? And a lot of people would stop there. But today, the fourth element of this four-legged stool, or the fourth wheel in the car, however you want to go, is relate on two ways. One, relate as it means a relationship. You don't want just a hit and run transaction. You want to build a lasting, loving, trusting relationship with your target, right? And then you want them to actually relate their experience to others through the power and the amplification of social media. It used to be when we grew up, our moms, talked over the white picket fence as to how they got their laundry so clean. Well, today we have social media in a zillion different forms, and it can work for you and it can work against you, right? And then who wouldn't, buy anything of any significance and not read reviews first, right? So we become into this relate society on those different levels. And I think that's really how it takes that think, feel, do model one more step up. And if you can get someone to relate or serve as ambassador of your brand, someone else, that's the most sincere form of marketing and the highest return on investment any of us marketers could ever hope for.
yeah, I totally agree. You know, we had a little pre chat about threes versus fours, and you know, a
Here it
lot of people
comes.
say why motive three, right? And I mean, there's lots of reasons for motive three, and I think the real reason we picked motive three, and some people who know me for a long time know that I studied the classics at Notre Dame, so I go all the way back to Homer and Aristotle and Plato and all that stuff, and you know, I still think that maybe Aristotle wrote the best book on persuasion that's probably ever been written. But he talked about logos, ethos, and pathos, right? And which basically means that that's two of yours, right? Logos is what are the logical reasons to believe, you
Mhm.
know. Now pathos is like, but do I feel it? Because we all know that there's a lot of times where you're like, I logically know I need to do this, but I don't feel like doing it, so I'm not going to do it. So those
Right.
feelings do matter, and in
Yeah.
all things marketing, if you can't make somebody feel something, you can't make them make a decision about something. I mean, that's been proven in brain science, et cetera, et cetera. And then the ethos is really about, what are the kind of credibility, authority reasons for, like, what are the other reasons to believe? Like, tell me you've been there before, tell me a success story. But it all does come back to that idea of, you said connection or relate, which
Yeah,
I
relate.
totally agree. For me, it's belief. You've got to have these three fundamental things: logos, ethos, pathos, to create belief. Can you have more? Sure. They fall into other categories. In our framework, right? We're kind of talking about two different things, but I know that you rattled off a bunch of fours before, and I loved hearing them. So I'd love to hear more about your
Well,
four.
like I said, I used to manage with the rule of threes, and now I lead with the higher power of fours. And I got to thinking about not just this four circle Venn diagram, but there are four seasons, not three. There are four directions, not three. There are four chambers to the human heart, not three. There are four elements to an atom, not three, the source of light. And so I could go on and on with this foreplay, but you get the idea, right? I had literally in the book have a list at least 2 pages long of things that I found four of, and I thought they were all related to growth. When you think about those things, it's astounding. Um, but what I'm hearing about your model is still dead on, about you have to have belief, but then ultimately you want that person to do something, right? So what you're saying is each of those 3 words that lead to those think, feel, relate all help someone then go do something.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we're all in the business is in the business of getting people to do things,
Right.
and, I think that the more gray hairs we get, right, the more we realize that you really need to, you're trying to create these little transformations in people on a
Yeah.
daily basis that they feel, so that they are motivated to go
Yeah.
and do something that maybe they've been only thinking about for a long time,
Yeah.
or someone has been telling them to do it. And so I think that we're definitely drinking from the same punch bowl on that one.
Well, I like you used the kind of the notion of it was the right time. You were thinking about it and then you finally took action. Well, like all of us, I mean, there's certain items like a car, you don't just say, I'm going to go buy a car today if you don't need one, if you haven't been thinking about it for a while. At least I don't. Maybe some people are wealthy enough to do that, but I'm not. But if you were going to buy a stick of gum and say, I think I'm going to try this one versus that one today at the grocery store, well, then you just, you go right there and do it. Okay. I think that timing is everything. And so that's why it's so important for a brand to understand there's a gestation period,
Mhm.
depending on the brand itself, right? And you got to plant the seeds and water them and fertilize them over time so that they grow. And at the right time, your target audience, your customer, and a Cheesecake Factory, if I ever use the word customer, I'd have my head knocked off. It's guest, right?
Mhm.
So words matter. Your guest would then be in a position to make a decision based on what I call a mind handle. And I didn't make this up. A guy named Ken Womack, who's a creative director in Dallas, who I work with, said it. And I thought, that's perfect. It's like that mind vault that allows someone to kind of store away all the inputs, not just their rational ones, but how they feel about it until it's time to make a decision to act. And so, unless you're in like direct mail business where it's response right away, most of the time you're in a considered purchase where someone's going to have a lot of stimuli coming at them. They're processing it every single day with all the ads that are bombarding us, and they're trying to sift through the ones they're semi-interested in and then file away the salient points in their mind vault until there is a time to take action.
I love that, because I mean, I'm gonna take an opportunity to do a little PSA here to the people listening. You know, God, I've worked with a lot of marketers lately, and we both know how business churns through CMOs, right?
Yes.
It's like, give me the results right now. And the reality is that And I've worked with some that are really under pressure to kind of deliver on performance. And I'm constantly
Yeah.
talking about, there's the 99% that it is just not time for them to buy right now. And then there's the 1% that are, but you still are communicating with that 99%. Like,
Yeah.
you can't give
Plant
up.
seeds.
You can't
Yep.
get tired, and you can't get inconsistent, and
Right.
you got to have patience. And
Yep.
part of what I love about your the purpose in your purposeful growth revolution is that, purpose is long term. I've been kind of having
Yes.
these epiphanies lately. You get older and wiser, that if you're not playing the long game, you're not really playing the game. You're trying to stunt, you're trying to manipulate, you're trying to, get something to happen by the end of the quarter. More about direction than perfection,
Yeah.
and it's like, where are you pointed, and how much do you believe in where you're pointed, that you're going to be consistent enough and tenacious enough and persistent enough to keep heading in that direction, trusting that the results will come.
Yeah. And I love that you said that, because, you think about the mighty oak tree. Do you think it got mighty overnight? It's been said that an oak tree is merely one acorn that held on.
I love that.
So
First of all, I'm a
it's
tree nerd, so I love it.
good.
I'm
Or my
total.
big tree in my backyard, again, it didn't grow tall, strong, and fruitful overnight, but it ultimately did. And it bore big leaves, and it bore fruit. And those figs, we used to can them and eat them, and they're wonderful. But like I said, they also have seeds in them that could help spawn future growth. And I think that's the kind of thing that people need to understand, is that because if you don't play the long game, you know what happens? You might hit something, and it's the boom splat effect, right? Boom, we're heroes, splat. We got to overlap that next year or next quarter. And so you go from hero to goat really quick. And what I've learned in my long career in life is that, being a CMO is a tough position. You better have the thick skin for it, because there are going to be times when you're the hero, and then sometimes when you're the goat. And a lot of times it happens with this whole idea that we have to grow. No one says, we had a good year, let's go back and just do the same thing. Well, they say, we're going to set the bar higher next year. Well, then what if some dynamics that didn't happen the year prior crop up? Oh, I don't know, COVID, or maybe there was a governmental issue that affected your business. Maybe there was a lawsuit, or maybe there was whatever. Other variables can come up that CMO has no control over, but yet we're still expected to drive top line, build a brand for the long term, and all those good things. But sometimes, we don't have all the same tools we had, or maybe that some of them got taken away.
Yeah, I mean, the harsh reality of business and life is that shit happens,
Yeah.
and the world is still happening. It's not just about what your company is. Like, you can't just be like, no, I've got my plan, we're going to go forward. It's like you're in these kind of economic conditions, these competitive conditions, and you need to. I was working on a post the other day, and I'm like, you need to fly with both, the cockpit, but you got to look out the window too. You need to actually have both of those things and see what's around me. You can't just fly by looking at your dashboard.
Well,
So
and marketers need to understand their role, their bigger role as brand stewards. And if you're a CMO and you don't see yourself that way, and you have the skills to suit that, to see things that way, and you're not allowed to, you're in a bad position. But if you're a good marketer, know how to influence, you can build relationships with the other departmental leaders and get everybody on the same board, and make sure that we're all aligned. We're all, again, all oars in the water, rowing together to get to our shared destination, which is to make our brand grow into its full potential. And it's a challenge, but you know what? I loved it. I wouldn't have it any other way. And I want to help lead other marketers. And one of the things that I would hope that your listeners and viewers would do is go to my website at markamears.com and take my free Purposeful Growth self-assessment. Takes about 5, 6, 7 minutes. But when you're finished, you can automatically and immediately download a PDF report that's customized with your scores, along with some seeds for growth that I provide within each of the questions. And that'll give you kind of a benchmark as to not only where you are in this whole idea of purposeful growth, but maybe how aligned the company you work for is. And it gives you an opportunity to rate them as well. So if you and your listeners would do that, it gets you started on your growth journey, and then maybe we'll have a chance to talk. And I would love, because I love to learn and grow. I mean, I could spend time talking to you forever. And I know you've got some smart, savvy, listeners and followers. And so I'd invite you to connect with me on LinkedIn, and let's keep the conversation going so I can learn from you.
Absolutely. I love it. And in fact, Mark, would that be something that's cool for like a whole team to take?
Yes. And that's really where I'm going with it, because I've not only had the self-assessment, I've created a brand assessment. So now imagine everybody throughout the organization takes it as an individual, but then the executive team answers some open-ended questions of, so what are you doing in each of these key areas? And so my goal would be to provide a report to say, here's where you're aligned. Nice job, pat on the back. Here's where you're misaligned. And then we can segment it by department. We can segment it by level. And so we can see who's getting it and who's not getting it. So we, like a doctor, can pinpoint exactly where it hurts and then come up with programs to close the gap and make sure that we are all aligned.
I love it. I love it. That's awesome. Thank you, Mark. So before we kind of end the recording, any other parting words, anything that you want to say or pass on that we didn't get an opportunity to talk about because we just didn't get there?
Yeah, I mean, we got to a lot of places, but I would say you and I both, worked in the entertainment industry, and I'm sure you're a movie buff. I don't know if you remember Glengarry Glen Ross, but there was a famous movie with Alec Baldwin and Jack Lemmon, and Alec Baldwin is this kind of sales guy, and he's in this meeting with these people trying to get their performance up, and he gets up at this whiteboard and he writes ABC, and he says, it stands for always be closing, right? And so that's a sales mantra. Well, I use a little bit different, as you know now, Ginger. I like to think a little bit differently. And I'll change the C from closing to always be curious. Growing is about learning, and learning is about being curious about what you don't know. And when you do those two things together, I believe you're going to have a more fulfilling life and work experience that is really going to hopefully get you to a new and higher level of performance. Always be curious.
Always be curious. I think I've actually said that before. Curiosity is my favorite word. People are like, what's your word? And I'm like, curious.
Yeah.
So I love that. So yeah, everybody go to markamears.com. Check out the assessment. I'm going to do it. I have not done the assessment yet, so I'm super excited about that. And Mark, thank you so much. This was like an amazing conversation. I really appreciate it. And I'm so happy to catch up. And I know that we're going to have to do this more often.
We're not going to wait 14 or 15 years to get back together. As a matter of fact, I'll probably send you an email when we're done, because I want to get back together with you already. So thank you for your generous invitation to join you. I know this is a new show for you, and I hope your listeners and followers got some value out of it. I know I did. I always learn from you. I love your emails. I love your thought process, and look forward to staying in touch.
Thanks, Mark.